Hey everyone, so glad you're joining us for another episode of the series that I'm calling Scars and Wisdom. And this is really a conversation space where we honor the truth of what we've lived through and the wisdom that now lives in us because of it. And today I'm so excited to talk with Andrea Brunswick. So, Andrea, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and let everyone know what you're up to in the world?
Okay, thanks, Karen. As Karen said, my name is Andrea Brunswick. And just to let you guys know that I am Canadian, and I live in the Toronto region. What am I up to in the world, Karen? And that's a good question. I am up to working with women. I am a creative life strategist for reinvention, and my program is the Proverbs 31 Reinvention Blueprint. And I've been up to this since 2004, and we'll get into that through the series of questions because it was through trauma and a tragic event that shifted me into the coaching. Creative life strategist is just because I always disliked once I got certified as a life coach because back then people didn't, they'd be like, "So what do you do?" And you'd be like, "Oh, I'm a life coach." And then they'd be like, because people didn't
Eyes
know.
glazed over.
Yeah. So that's my little answer there.
I love that. Creative life strategist. I get that. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good. All right. So, the concept is we do talk about the scar and then we move through that journey of getting to the wisdom. So let's start there. What was the scar that really broke you open and led to your future kind of transformation?
Okay, so I have a couple of scars. Now, an initial scar tomorrow actually will be 40 years from when I lost my father. And that truly was the initial cracking. Like that cracked me really bad. 40 years ago, people weren't talking about grief. And I wasn't old. 40 years ago, I was just a little spring chicken. And I had no concept of what death meant, right? I didn't understand finality.
Mm,
And I got that brutal teaching. Let's just put it like that. And then I met my husband just a few months after I lost my father. And then it was 22 years ago. I had just turned 40. My husband had just turned 41. Our son had just celebrated his 10th birthday, and our daughter was 5.5. And my husband passed away in his sleep. And yeah, waking up beside your husband who's no longer alive is a very freaky thing, to be truthful. And to have to sit your children down, to have to sit your children down and to tell them that their father is no longer alive, that was, yeah, that was like nothing. That was a really surreal nightmare moment.
oh my gosh, absolutely. No one can prepare you for that kind of moment.
No, and you know what? Here's the thing. So with my father, he had been sick for 4 years, and people will tell you, people like to say things. I don't think they mean ill by it. But I also, and I'm sure I've been guilty of this in my life. But sometimes you know how something comes out of your mouth before you can even stop it. And so for the 4 years that my father took to pass away, I was hearing from people, "You'll be okay because this is preparing you," which I think messed me up even more when he did pass away because I had that expectation that I would be okay, but I was so freaking not okay, Karen. So you're right. And then you go to sleep on a Monday evening after a long weekend. You've put the kids to bed. You and your husband go to sleep. Myself and my husband to bed. And you wake up for the Tuesday to for him to go into the office, for the kids to get them up for school. Only doesn't wake up.
Yeah, all loss is valid. And no matter how it happens, it's going to throw you into a tailspin. I think
Yeah.
I also have had a lot of different losses in my life, and like you, with my mom, it was Alzheimer's, so Again, I knew and I understood where this was going, and I was grieving her along the way, but there's nothing that prepares you for the finality. And that's where everything just blows up, is when you realize, yes,
They're never
I did.
coming back.
Yeah, they're never like, this is it. And I held my mom's hand until she took her last breath, and I wasn't prepared for that, which was such an honor. And I'm so glad I had that opportunity. But it also was the thing that haunted me for a while. Just right, all the visuals and the images that went along with that. I've never witnessed anybody pass away before, so I didn't know what to expect. So yes, people say things, I think, well intentioned.
I think so. I do think it is well intentioned.
Yeah, but it is very impactful. And I am so sorry. I'm so sorry for the loss of
Yeah,
your
thank you.
father and your husband.
And my mom, like you, I held her hand as we had to take her off of life support. But by this point, I think it was a little bit more. She had passed 3 years after my husband. But again, I think that we can experience the same experience in different ways a few times over. But I also believe that things can trigger the previous time, if that makes sense to you.
Absolutely. And I think that's not only from the previous losses that you've had, but what also happens is all the losses that we've never processed, they don't go away.
Right, exactly. It's like a tsunami.
It's a
And it just,
tsunami. That's the exact right word. It's a tsunami. And so I always encourage people that say, I'm just plowing forward, I'm just moving forward, I'm just keeping busy. And I get that. That was my classic go-to move my whole life. And we were taught that. I feel like I was taught that in my
yeah,
household.
just
You know,
distract yourself and
just
be busy.
keep going, sleeping under the rug, right? There was no emotional framework taught
No,
for how to work through really complex emotions.
no,
And
because you're
so
not supposed to process them.
you just push
You
them down and
stuff
keep
them.
going. Yeah. That
Stuff
was the
them.
message. That was the message. And we listened, right? We followed the rules and we understood that assignment. And
Yeah.
so many people have unprocessed grief. We're walking around in a society with so much unprocessed grief. And
It's
one of my
scary.
hypotheses is it is scary because what's happened is everything is cause and effect. Like we know that's just one of the laws that our universe operates under. But when we have so much time that's passed between the cause and the effect, it's hard to tie it together and associate it to that thing. So we forget. So when we have all this grief that we've never processed, and today we're walking around with all of these,
But then
it,
don't you find if we then dump it on the next generation to come? I know that I did my unprocessed stuff of my father
oh, yeah,
on my children,
yeah,
and I did my best to clean up the mess very unsuccessfully, I must say, after my husband passed, because I knew that unprocessed grief and trying to take my life when I was 27, I believe I was. I didn't want my children to, because grief is one of those things. And there is circumstantial or situational depression that will come with it. And because my kids were young, it would then affect them as they grew older. And if I didn't process it, so that cause and effect, absolutely.
yeah. It's hard to remember that's what this may be tied to. Like we're walking around with disease or mental health and these things that are bubbling up for us. And I don't think we're stopping to even go back and say, could this be tied to the unprocessed emotions and grief and trauma that we've experienced? And I think for a lot of those circumstances, the answer is yes. And so I always start when I work with clients, I always start by going backwards before we can go forwards, because if we don't go back and allow ourselves to really face that unprocessed grief, it's going to continue to what we don't face just chases us, right? It
But
doesn't
that's
go
just
away.
it. And if you don't get somebody qualified that you're going to for help, because here's the scary part. I had been seeking out help, professional, traditional forms of mental health help. And it's very unfortunate. But the truth is that there's a lot of really unqualified. I don't care that people have a lettering next to their name. There's more unqualified than qualified and really equipped help out there. And that is very scary.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in any industry, but yes, I think you're right. Like we're seeing and hearing a lot more of that. When I went through my grief educator training to get certified, I was blown away by how much I didn't know. Like I just didn't know any of this. And I'm like, I remember saying to the instructor, like, why isn't anybody talking about this? He's like, that's what you're for. That's why I'm certifying people so you all can go out into the world and share this information and start to educate people, because that's just like at the base level, we have to start with education because there's just been a lack of it. And when we don't understand something, it's hard to know how to move through that.
Oh, yes.
Understanding kind of sits at the bottom, the foundational pillar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you think back to those first most difficult experiences that you faced with grief, what was the most surprising thing for you?
It's a good question. What was the most surprising? Ooh, what real truly was what was most surprising to me was how it left me feeling very shameful and very guilty. And in different with my father, I felt very guilty and shameful because, in all honesty, last maybe year and a half, 2 years of his life, I became like a little bitch because I didn't know that I was angry. Because again, nobody was helping me process. So here I was, like 20. By the time he passed, it was before I had turned 22. And now I'm 62 today. You think you know a lot, right? You think you know so much
Yeah.
when you're 20 and in that your 20s and even your 30s. But I knew nothing. And I didn't know that I was angry that my father was dying because I was very much a daddy's girl. I was lashing out. Now, I didn't get that awareness until my mid 30s when I had already now had both my son and my daughter, that I was able to connect those dots. With my husband's passing, there was guilt because somehow I thought I had contributed or even in the most messed up way killed him
Mm,
because of a conversation I had with God 2 weeks before his passing, just expressing how I was feeling and where I was in life and questioning the things that I was like about success. And listen, you're in your 30s, you're going to be 40, you're like that whole hustle and grind. I get that now because I can see it when I see others in in that age range. So that whole hustle and grind that we do in those decades. So yeah. And then I think also insecurity as now, hey, I was left no life insurance because we're poor planners, but the insecurity in terms of now being a single parent. So
mm,
guilt, shame, and insecurity.
yeah. So relatable. I think like 99% of the work that we do with grief is around the guilt and the shame.
Yeah.
And when I learned about this in my grief educator, again, another big aha. I learned that our mind hates uncertainty so much that it would rather place blame on us because it gives the illusion of some kind of control, which made sense, right? Once I learned that, I'm like, oh, okay. So this is my mind's intentionally doing this because uncertainty feels so far out of the realm of anything
You
that,
feel like you feel like a rug's been pulled out from underneath you with uncertainty. And then uncertainty, I think, can go to anything, not even just when there's death and there's grief in it. People lose their job or a
yeah,
breakup or
any change.
anything when you
Yeah.
don't know and you can't control, because at the end of the day, even if you're the most, how do I say this, uncontrolling, like free bird kind of individual, you're still challenged with the needing to control the outcome or the needing to know from point A to point Y, like
Mhm.
every step, every direction, when I'm going to make my left turn, when I'm going to make my right turn. I think we think it's like Google Maps. And then when you press, when you go on steps for Google Maps and it tells you,
Yeah.
because you don't even want to
Turn,
wait for the
turn,
lady. Yeah,
turn
you don't
left
even
out of
want to
your
wait for her
driveway.
voice. So you want to read it. No, I
Yeah.
need to see this. Give it to me now.
I need the steps. Yes. And that's so much of what our brain is doing. Our brain has been gathering these data points with the people that, we are attached to for our whole lives. And it's like there's this filing cabinet, Rolodex of data points for each person. And so when we lose somebody, our brain can't process that
Yeah.
we still have an attachment to somebody, but they're not physically here. And so that's why a year goes by and you pick up your phone to text somebody. Like you logically know that they're not here anymore, but we have to intentionally do that remapping and rewiring of our brain to say, I'm going to hold this person in my heart. I'm going to carry them with me, but they're not physically here anymore. So I don't need you, brain, to keep trying to predict when I'm going to see them again. Cause that's where so much of that like yearning comes from, right? It's like we're just trying to reach for something that's just out of reach.
And the dates, I think dates of make a very significant impact, like the birthdays that they would have celebrated
Yes.
or the date of their passing. My wedding anniversary date, all
Do
of
you
those
find your
things.
body like you sense it before the date comes? Do you
That's a good question, because I can tell you this, each year it's never been the same, because there's some years, like whether it be my father, my husband, or my mother, that I just don't even recognize where we are in terms. Okay, for instance, we're coming up to the end of June. Now, there's some years where I'm not even, because I have just whatever so much going on, I'm not even aware of it. But then there's other years, that anticipation, no, it had started even a couple of weeks before. And I don't know about for you, but then when there's things same such as Mother's Day, when the whole world is also celebrating, when you see it, right? It's, oh, yeah,
the void becomes for me, I feel the void. I
yeah,
can it's like viscerally
right?
feel it. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think those days I've just come to call them grief days, the ones that I know are going to be hard. And then the ones that I don't know are going to be hard. And I just take those days and I'm like, today is going to be a grief day. And my family knows like what that means. And when they see me just laying on the couch and just vegging out and watching Netflix all day, I'm okay. I'm just taking my
right.
grief
I
day
just need
because
to numb out. I just
I
need
just
to
need to
numb out.
chill. Yeah, I just need to be here, not around people. Just that's how I need to process it.
Exactly.
And you talked about the insecurity, and that really makes me think about the roles and the identities that we have taken on and we have adopted our whole life. So, how did both of those losses for you impact? your identity.
First of all, very deeply. Now, but in different ways. So when George, my husband, passed, because while he was alive, my role as a wife was very separate from my role as a mother. People live differently, right? Some people will mesh the two together, but mine was very separate. So when that role of wife was taken from me, it really messed me up.
Yeah.
And again, people are well intentioned. I did my best to not get bitter. Right. But people would tell me to focus in more on my children. And I thought, my children aren't to be my support system, nor 5.5 and 10, nor are my children to be my friends. And nor am I to be their friend. I mean, my role is to fulfill is their mother, and I'm to be their support system. So I remember at the initial beginning that first year, if I was out with the kids, places where there would be other families, I really felt like I had the word freak stamped on my forehead. And if I saw fathers with their children on their shoulders, the way George used to when we would be out somewhere, and Carrie would, whether it would be Ryan or Natalie on his shoulders, I literally wanted to vomit. And I needed the anxiety and the panic attack that I experienced was just too much.
Yeah.
And really in that first year too, because we had a lot of traditions with the kids for certain things. And like I remember the first Canada Day where we used to take what of his passing years prior, we would go to a specific place for fireworks. There were concerts there. And of course the kids and we wanted to do it. And I remember the anxiety that whole day leading up to we were going there and just feeling. And I remember a strange woman. It's funny, the things that you remember and the things that you don't. And this very nice lady was talking to me and somehow and she was just so nice and so understanding of what was going on. But it is, look, it's 22 years later and I still will still come up. It's still can get. So the way you identify, the way I identified with things, and then my identity again as the role of wife being taken, I never lost my identity in my marriage. So I never really forgot who I was, but
Hmm.
yet I felt like, who do I want to be now when I grow up? If that makes sense.
It makes total sense. And I remember the night grief always comes at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
It comes visiting at the most inopportune time, doesn't ask for permission, just shows up. And I remember that feeling of, I don't, I remember looking in the mirror and I really didn't recognize the person looking back. And I couldn't quite understand that at the time. But I remember like at 3 o'clock in the morning, waking up and thinking, grief's taken who I knew I was before. Who do I want to be now? And then for me, because that was following the loss of my sister in 2019, and she
Mhm.
died in a fire at her home. So very
Oh my goodness.
suddenly, very tragically.
Whoa.
And so then it was followed by shame. And I'm like, you can't make this about you. You're just the sister. There's people that in your family that lost their daughter, their mother, their wife. You're just the sister. You just
But you
haven't.
lost your sister.
Yeah. And at the time, I wasn't allowing myself to fully acknowledge and validate
Right.
the loss, which is another whole thing that we often
That's
share
another
with people.
episode, Karen.
Another, there's just so many dynamics that come into play with grief. And, but yes, I do. I remember thinking, and then it almost felt a little exciting because I'm like, if I get to choose who I'm becoming, I felt like I actually get to intentionally do that. I don't feel like I ever thought about that up until that point. You just go along with the flow. You become who you think you need to be or who others expect you to be, and then
Exactly.
that's who you end up being. And then if you get that opportunity to say, I get to now rediscover or reclaim who I am, and I get to be intentional about that, that almost felt a little exciting. And not that I was excited because, oh, how it came to be. We would give it all back if we could have the person back with us for just a day, but we
Exactly.
can't. We can't. And so, how did that start to develop for you? That identity reconstruction piece?
Oh, it was like, so I'll answer it like this, and I hope I'm answering it. If I was given the opportunity to be, what's his name, Marty McFly from Back to the Future,
Yeah.
so
Yep.
where would I want to go back to? I don't know. I probably would want to go back to April of 1985 because that would have been months before my father passed. My God, which the summer of '85 is when Back to the Future came out. But anyway, that's a whole other
Wow.
thing.
How synchronistic.
Yeah. Ask me your question again. I apologize.
No, you're good. Just thinking about how those wheels started to turn for you with
Yeah.
identity reconstruction and how did that start to develop?
So after George passed, it- after my father passed, because I didn't understand and I didn't know things about grief. I was in the last year of, I was going to art college, but I had lost complete interest.
Mm,
But again, you don't know that's part of grief, right?
yeah.
When George passed, I actually started to have some really crazy freaking thoughts. Like, how do I take my life and the kid's life like really easy, one clean swoop, because we just want to be a family again.
Yeah.
And I remember getting so freaked out that I heard God say to me, go in your room and find the card to the funeral home for the grief counselor. And I could have walked to the hospital, literally where both my kids were born, but something said not to do that.
Mm,
And I ripped my room apart and I found her card, and thank the Lord she was there. And I told her what was happening. She was such a beautiful woman. Her name was Isabel. And she said, Andrea, I just need you to hear me. Like, really, I need you to hear me. Don't be afraid because that is part of grief. I was, I let out an exhale because I think I had been holding my breath. This was already a couple months after George had passed. I think I had been
mhm.
literally holding my breath for months.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And I was,
Breathe. Yeah.
yeah. And now that first year, I couldn't do anything. I was a mess, a mess. I had just gone on, just a month before George passed. I was doing a seasonal job. I couldn't think about working, and I knew I needed to be there for the kids. Natalie, 5.5, had a different experience this than Ryan did. And Ryan and George were a birthday a day apart from one another. So I think there was that for him. So I needed to take some time off. The coaching industry had just started. There was a reality show that I used to watch called The Starting Over House.
Mm,
It was phenomenal. Two life coaches, when would come in, they would stay, they would work with these coaches. And I was like, wow, that's really, look at that. I now am doing a career workshop because that question, who do I want to be when I grow up? I literally was asking myself that, which I always have found weird that we have kids who they want to be when they grow up. Because I was like now 41 and I didn't know who I wanted to be. Okay.
like, how did you can even begin to answer that question?
I honestly, I find that it's very perplexing for me. Like, why do we do that to children? Okay.
Yeah,
And sometimes
like
we box them in, right? Because they'll say when they're 9 they want to be a lawyer. And then you constantly remind them as they're aging, but they don't really want to be aware. They just said that when they were 9. We really messed.
If we knew how easily we could screw our kids up, I don't know anybody would have them.
Honestly, that's another thing I would like to go back in time and backtrack all the screw ups. So
And not to
many.
protect them, right? Because I think it's important that they see we're not perfect. So it's not for that reason. It's just, gosh, when you learn and you understand like how much of it is generational and you're passing things on generation after generation and you're like, okay, I'm going to break this cycle. Yeah, you wish that you had understood that a little sooner. Like that.
Yeah. Or I think it's important too that we are honest with our kids as they're like now my son is he's 32, my daughter's 27. Okay. So they're adults now. But along when I was those ages, I wish somebody like my mom would have ever expressed to me that there were times, say in her 20s, that she felt so unsure or she was scared. Now, maybe not because my mom would be in her hundreds now. So certain generations weren't allowed the luxuries that other generations have been given, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember having a conversation with my mom. My mom was pretty controlling our whole life. And as I got into adult, I'm like, I'm not really okay with that anymore. And so I started to put boundaries in place. But I remember having a conversation with her. I'm like, Mom, like, just tell me about your childhood. What was your childhood like? And once I understood what her childhood was like, I was like, of course, that's all. And so it helped me. She was a parent for the first time, doing the best job she could do with the skills and the knowledge she had. I was doing the same thing. So it took some of that
It just repeats
sadness.
itself.
Yeah,
It's just
it will.
patterns
Pattern.
repeating oneself and repeating themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a lot of patterns that repeated, but it was really after the first year that I discovered coaching. I started to get certified and I started to work with coaches for my own healing
Mhm.
because of very unsuccessful attempts with through bef- through after the loss of my father, very ineffective professionals not connecting depression to grief, not connecting any of those dots, and the attempted suicide with the loss of my dad. So when I discovered this coaching industry, which I actually discovered before that last year my husband was alive for kids, there was a life coach that I found was on my way to the office one day. A lot of things were changing in his family's dynamics where people were passing, his grandmother had passed, his father's lung cancer had come back. So I knew there was going to be a lot of changes for my kids. And I
Mm.
found this coach who worked with kids. And I thought, I showed it to George and go, I really think Ryan needs this because my father in law was a very involved grandfather. And I knew that when he's no longer here, that's
Yeah.
that presence is going to be hugely missed. Little did I know that in 7 months, my kids would lose a lot of their father's family, including their father. Yeah. Yeah.
And how did they react and how did they acclimate to those losses?
Trying to remember back, Ryan really, he struggled. And I remember, so it was almost towards the end of May when George passed. And then here in the school system, the kids go to school almost right up until the end of June, and then they break for the summer vacation. I had put the kids in a day camp, and I remember some of the counselors telling me that, especially when they would have swim, that Ryan would have a bit of meltdowns, and it's just not fair to be 10 and to lose your father. And I think we don't want to say it ill intention, but my father-in-law, because he had been in going in and out of the hospital his last year, And 4 years prior to when they discovered the cancer, which we thought was a success, but then he just missed that 5-year mark. That was something that Ryan was very familiar with. And then my daughter was born and she had a healthy grandfather. And then that last year of his life, that was something new. But they knew that there was a lot of funerals
Yeah.
and we were burying people. My son, because boys really get overlooked. I really want moms to hear this. We focus a lot. We think only girls have hormonal issues because when they get their periods. If that's politically correct to say anymore, I don't even know anymore. But so
What happens?
we
Yes.
we, we tend to overlook, and because I have older nephews, and my brother's 9 years older than me, and my sister's 10, so my nephews are that much older. And I saw with a couple of them that when they turned 16 in age range, I guess as they were coming out of their puberty, they were challenged with depression. So for Ryan, when he was about 16, 17, now that grief bit him in the ass and it was like a dog and it had its teeth in his ass and it wasn't letting go of my son.
So
Yeah.
scary.
And I had been sending them, we had been going because I knew I needed to do like that night. So George passed, I don't know, he had passed someone in his sleep. But that morning, when I realized my husband was no longer alive, that evening, people came over to see me. And a friend who I'd been friends with since college, and she was our maid of honor, and I was hers. We were talking. I said, I know I have to do something different this time because I can't do it how I did with my father. I can't take my life here or try to. I'm a mom, so I knew I needed to do things differently. And after I
Mhm.
made that call to the grief counselor that day about the thoughts that I was having, she directed me to a psychiatrist who only dealt with grief, but more specific to young spouses, which was very helpful.
Yeah.
Because I
Super
was
dialed
40.
into your, yeah.
I'm not 60. I'm not 70, or even though, please, I don't want to take away from anybody because that can be even harder. But the point is that I'm young. And when I remember when I said I used to feel like freak was
Yeah.
stamped on my forehead. So I was taking the kids to many different bereavement groups. Then again, we started bereavement groups after my mom because the kids had lived with their grandmother from the time they came home from a hospital. So my mom was a huge role in that was like losing another parent to my children. That
Mhm.
didn't stop though. That didn't stop that grief depression from biting my son when he was almost 17 in the ass. And I get that monster, when a monster gets its grips, because I really believe grief is like a monster and it gets a hold of you. And then, now that's challenging my identity as a mom and my guilt is coming up and I should have. So now that grief, now it's messing, it's doing that whole, yeah, we're going to get you now, Andrea. Now we didn't know, you didn't think we're going to take you out because now we're going to take you out. And then, Karen, couple years after my son is in this depression, my daughter's walking home and she gets hit by a car.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like it was just like, yeah, it was like, honestly, the enemy was on my family. It was like the enemy was on me and was on my family, and it really wanted to challenge me. And that's other episodes of Ever You Want. But that identity as a mom, as a capable mom, as I have my own business, I'm a coach. Industry itself is such a feast or famine industry. Then your income and you're not a good enough provider. And now you have guilt about that. Honestly, that when you said grief wakes you up at 3, mine would wake me up in a sweat
Mm.
at 2 or 3 in the morning. Yeah, just literally in a sweat, panic. Yeah.
Yeah. From what you said, going into that space as an entrepreneur, it will break you. Like grief's already broken
That
open
breaks
and
you alone. Absolutely.
it's a whole nother level.
Oh, man. Oh, yeah.
You don't even know the depths of the beliefs and the limiting beliefs and the insecurities until you're now faced with, I'm going to put myself out there and tell people that I can help heal them. And I have to be vulnerable and all of these things. And you're like, why are you doing this to me? Like, why are you pushing me into this place that feels so foreign to me?
Yeah.
Like, I never questioned my identity in my corporate jobs. I'm like, I'm good at what I do. I have a strong work ethic. I
Because
figure
now
things
you
out.
have to promote yourself because it's a
Yes.
matter of self promotion in a sense. And we're so conditioned, it depending on your conditioning, to not brag about yourself. And you're just being way
Well,
too prideful.
yeah.
And
Play
then you're a
small.
bragger. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
And if you're internationally coaching federated certified, they tell you can't use the term healing. You can't use the term therapeutic or therapy. So what do you want my messaging to be?
Yeah. How do I convey this to
How do I
people in a
convey it?
way that,
Exactly.
and that's why so many of us struggle to get that messaging, right? Because you
Yeah.
just, for me, it went round and round in my head. I'm like, how do I
But
explain
it
this
is
to
therapy.
people?
But it is healing. But it is but isn't it funny
All of
that
it.
in the
Yeah.
new age world you can say Reiki is healing? You can past life regression is healing. You can use those terms and you can say that, but in the coaching industry, you're not allowed. You're deemed like you're demonized. I don't know what it's like today, but I'll tell you back in 2005, you were not allowed to say it. No.
Yeah, and when you don't have that strong identity as an entrepreneur, right? As somebody out there going to help people, the first time you get those comments like challenging you because you don't have the counselor certifications, then all of a sudden you're like imposter syndrome
Oh, but I'll tell you something.
and you retreat.
Honestly, the first few years when I became a coach, it was perfect. I didn't question anything, and people were being referred to me. It was after when my son was in depression and my daughter got hit by that car, and now there was a lot of chaos in my house because I didn't even recognize that my daughter was suffering from post-traumatic stress. I
Mm,
didn't have that awareness because I guess I didn't want to really focus on the fact that my kid got hit by a car and has had injuries and could have died. Like I didn't allow myself, but what I did allow that insanity was who are you to be able to help another woman? How can you even? So I had to take a step back from my business because I felt so out of integrity. That was the way the wise.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Very familiar. I think what we've talked about just highlights such a need for this education and for helping people understand what grief really
Yeah.
is, because when we have all these misconceptions and these myths and we don't understand it, that's what happens is we immediately go into, I'm doing it wrong and I feel like I'm going crazy, and all of these, we're putting all these self judgments on it because society is telling us, just keep going, just get, aren't you over it
Pick
yet?
up
Like,
your bootstraps, dust yourself
yeah,
off, one
yeah,
foot
just
in front of the other.
right,
Strong. Andrew, you're strong. Look at you. My goodness. We're so impressed that you're roasting a freaking chicken that's 2 weeks after your husband's passing. Look at you. And you're
right.
cooking dinner for the family. It's
And when you're, for me, I strong was my identity. That was my identity, a
yes.
strong fixer. And so when my sister passed away, I wasn't allowing myself to even break down because I'm like, if I break down, who, another identity crisis, who am I? Because I I got the applause for being strong. And so I didn't want that to stop because that was just validating, like holding on to like any validation that I like was keeping anything together in my life, right? Shock came in and I was like happy for it because it just let me go forward for a period of time. And then the shock wore off. And then that's when everything started to crumble.
Were you who was older? You or your sister?
My sister was 2 years older than me,
Yeah.
and
That had to have been so hard, Karen. Oh my God.
it was really hard, and my sister and I, our relationship was strained at times because she did have a lot of mental health issues as well, and I didn't understand any of it, and I wasn't a
Right.
very compassionate person at the time, and
Mm,
so I'm like, "Just be happy, look at your life, like, anybody would love to have your
mm,
life." And I
right.
didn't
Yeah.
understand because,
What was
we had the
going on
same
inside of
childhood,
her? Yeah.
and I'm like, "We had the same childhood, nothing." My parents had a terrible divorce, but I would always say there's people who have had way worse childhoods than we did, and
Because
also
again, we're conditioned
were
to
so conditioned.
eat all the food on your plate because there's starving children in Africa.
Yes.
It's that same mentality, but there's people worse off than you.
Yeah.
In a
You're
sense, that
not.
makes sense, right? To find that
Yeah.
gratitude for what you have when there's that emotional trauma or whatever is going on inside an individual. That emotional wiring is not there. It's things are not wired properly. And events in a family, like I told you, when George passed, that passing affected, I had two children experiencing the same experience in different ways.
Yes.
You and your sister experienced the divorce of your parents, but in different ways,
And it imprints differently, and
right?
it can be a big event, or it can be something that doesn't, like, when I look back at some of the things that have left the biggest imprints in my life, I'm like, "That wasn't that big of a thing," but it was to seven-year-old me. Seven-year-old me didn't understand that it wasn't about
Correct.
me. My dad moving to Florida when I was in 3rd grade after my parents got divorced, I didn't understand at that age that wasn't about me not being lovable. That's how it imprinted
No,
on.
it's why is my father leaving the
Yeah,
state and the area? And why is my father going away? And what did I do?
I must be it must be because I didn't do the right things or I'm not lovable. And that turned into my relationship pattern, right? All men are going to
Right.
leave. My abandonment wound was strong. And going back to your childhood, it holds so much information. It really holds so many of the answers that help us make sense of why things are happening in our life today.
Correct.
And people are really resistant to do it. And I understand it is scary to think about opening Pandora's box. I get it. But it's almost like that monster under your bed, right? Are you going to continue to fear the thing that we're not going to look at and just allow it to do its damage
Yes,
on us?
it's not going to go away.
It doesn't go away.
It doesn't go away. We want to believe here. And you had mentioned something just a couple of minutes ago. And I'm so grateful today that there are a lot of conversations about grief through the podcast industry.
Yes.
I'm really grateful for that because people will say that social media is not a good thing and technology, and they're right in a lot of ways. But if you use it in the correct way, and if you're spending time and there are these open dialogues and open conversation like you and I are having here today, and imagine that woman who's just lost her husband or a parent or a sibling or God forbid a child. I don't even know what that experience would feel like, but I know that would be not like anything I had experienced. But to, in a sense, be a fly on the wall to the conversation other people are having when they're watching a podcast, to understand, to be able to educate themselves. It is so necessary. When I went to my first bereavement group, when I lost my husband, I'm a little bit opinionated, if you haven't realized through a conversation, but wonderful woman, wonderful facilitator for the group. very lovely woman. It's not even a questionable about her niceness, but she was facilitating a bereavement group and had never experienced loss. And I thought, this is so bizarre that you are facilitating this 6 8 week, however long that group program was, and you've never yourself, not a spouse, not a parent, nothing. And blessed are you. How blessed was
Yeah, like,
she?
that's what I was just thinking. Bless her heart for getting into a field where
I
usually it only
question though,
comes to be when
yeah,
you've
but
had lived
I
experience.
question though who would hire her and place her in that role, to be truthful with you, in
Mm,
that role. I really do, because I think that there's things that have to be very relatable. And in all honesty, I really believe that is something. There has to be that relatability, because I don't think I was the only, again, what a lovely person. And she was doing her best to understand, but you can't understand and you don't understand. And even though you can take your courses and you can read your books and you can write your essays and you can be tested and you can do all of the things in the schooling, there
lived
has to be the
experience.
practical. You
Yeah.
have to. I fully believe that. I fully believe that.
Yeah, and it being in that space with the focus on grief and loss, like, I know everybody is going to be experiencing this differently. So it doesn't, it's not that the lived experience gives you that ability to just relate to everybody, but understand exactly what you're saying because who I was before the loss and who I was after, very different. And I don't know how I would have even begun to talk about that experience if I hadn't lived it
The
because it was
experience.
so different than what I thought it was going to be. Because again, we were conditioned and modeled that there's these steps that you walk through and you just go through these stages and then you get to the end of it and then everything's fine. And that's just not reality. That is not how I don't think anybody really experiences
Life doesn't work like that. I don't
it
care
doesn't. It's
whether
not nice and neat like
anything.
that.
And it's not
Yeah.
even just grief. The first time you become a mother, you've never
It
been a
was like,
mother
who's coming to
before.
pick you up from that? I remember coming home from the hospital. I'm like, when are the responsible people coming to pick you up? I'm responsible. I'm responsible.
Yeah.
Oh,
Now, maybe you were an aunt over. I had been an aunt since I was a little girl, and different role. Oh
yeah.
my goodness, different role. What do you mean
Yeah.
falling asleep? What do you mean they got gas? What do you mean they're crying all the time? Whatever the case may be. What do you mean? And oh, I'm
Yeah.
responsible.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting thing about grief, I find, is it's a very interesting paradox. It's the one thing that is going to happen to everybody over and over again because we're not just talking about grief from death. We're talking about grief from all of the losses that we
Yeah.
experience in our life. And it's the one area and it's getting better. And I'm so like you, I'm so grateful for the conversations that are starting to happen. But it's still an area that there's just so much resistance to. And
Right. Because it's
it's
uncomfortable.
fun.
Look, when I was talking about remembering back to that first Canada Day, like honestly, I was like, oh my God. It felt like July 1st, 2003 all over again.
Just right back there, put you right back in
Right
that
back.
space. Yeah,
So it's, you're right. The resistance that comes, the, I think the resistance comes to different things. So there's resistance to being vulnerable to it and being transparent in a conversation regarding it. And depending on the space and where you're doing it. Here, this is a recorded conversation, not oh, Karen and Andrea meeting at the local coffee shop and it's just between you and I.
mm,
This is a conversation that we're having and it's being recorded and whatever platforms you're going to place it on. And this is going to live on forever.
yeah,
Forever.
yeah. And again, when you're not conditioned, you didn't grow up in an environment where you felt like it was safe to express these emotions and
Right,
to be
right.
vulnerable, that adds a whole nother layer to
That's another
complexity
layer.
sits in.
Another layer.
It's just
And I will say this, because this is something I really learned through my own personal experience. So by the time I got into coaching and was taking now, there's now, so like at this point, it's probably around 2009, 2010 at this point, where Facebook is now, a lot of people are on Facebook and social media and things and recordings and videos. And I remember doing seminars and renting hotel rooms to sell my programs, but should be a talk and whatever the case may be. And I thought I was okay with sharing a lot of this stuff. But then I'll tell you, then guess what, Karen? I wasn't so okay with it, but I didn't realize I forced myself
mm,
to be okay with it because it was like, but I chose to be a coach. I'm choosing because I'm making these choices and I'm raising my hand. I forced myself, but I wasn't. So, sorry to be a little long winded. My point is this: you need to make sure that you are ready and that you are okay with sharing. Don't just do it because you think it's expected or
yeah.
you want to help, because it has a very counterproductive effect on you.
Yes. Good point. And I feel like there's a process to that, right? Sharing and starting to find your voice again can happen in more controlled ways so that when you get to that point, it's not the first time you're just out there just vocally expressing all of this. And like you
Right.
said, for everybody to see and judge and comment on and all the things. And so yes, good point. That needs to be something that you do an internal check with to see where you're at
Yeah.
and meeting yourself where you're at. And I hope everybody is saying the same thing about grief, but there's no wrong way. There's no wrong way to do it. There just
No,
literally isn't.
there isn't one way.
There's not.
You're not going to read a book and it's going to tell you, well, what is it? 8 stages. That's why I said earlier, I didn't really ever pay attention, but, and stages are going to come differently and at different times and in different ways than maybe is written in that book. And because you're not experiencing it in that way, doesn't make it right or wrong. It makes it
Right.
unique for you.
Different. Yes, yes. And we're such unique individuals. So it would only stand to reason that our experiences with grief are going to be just as unique. And while I work with people and I have certain things that I know were instrumental in helping me get to where I'm at today, I don't think that's for everybody. I don't think my program works for everybody because it's for a very specific group of people
Correct.
who are built and designed the same way I am. That's the clients that you attract, right? Like I am very much into personal growth and spirituality and I want to find the lessons and all of the things. But that doesn't mean that if you don't want to find those lessons or you're not ready to find those lessons or that's just not in your kind of trajectory, that's wrong. It's not.
Right.
And I
Exactly.
just want to keep continuing to say that message because I understand and know what it feels like to feel like you're doing it wrong. And there's no reason for people to feel that way because you just can't do it wrong. You just
That's
can't.
right. That's right. Now,
I think we could talk for
we could go forever
hours,
with this. We could honestly,
forever. Um,
because there's so much done. There is so much unpacking. You take out the makeup bag and just unpacking the makeup bag and then take out your accessories. And you could honestly, you could go on and you can go on, but I have very much appreciated this time with you and to have this open and honest conversation and dialogue. Now,
yeah, it's been so interesting for me with everybody I've talked to, how it does manifest in different ways and how people are taking the experience and again, making it unique to them and then doing different things with it. It's fascinating to me. And I really love how it's coming out in different ways because we need so many we need it in 1,000 different ways. So
Yeah.
people see again that theme of there's not one way. There's not just
No.
one path. It's going
It's
to
it's
be
not a cookie cutter. It's not a cookie cutter.
not at all. Not at all. The last thing I want to ask you is if you could go back to the person that you were with your dad and experiencing that first great loss, and you know now, right, you have some of the wisdom you have today, what would you say to that younger version of yourself?
Don't hate yourself because your dad loved you and your dad knew how hard this was because it was hard for him to know that he was leaving you.
Mm,
And you put a lot of unnecessary expectations on yourself.
yeah. Oftentimes, the thing we need to hear the most and the permission that we need needs to come from ourselves,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, that's
Like in
beautiful.
short, Andrew, you weren't really a bitch. You were just afraid.
Yeah.
And when we're afraid, we lash out. And post traumatic stress, and even the traumatic stress that you're experiencing in the moment, even though it hasn't become post yet, it's the momentary traumatic stress, right?
Yeah.
It really
Yeah.
causes that fight or flight. And yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's why understanding ourselves on such a deep level is, for me, what came from the grief. I didn't expect it. I didn't expect that was one of the things that was going to come from that. But I did learn about myself on a very deep level. And I understood how I reacted and what my triggers were and all of those things. And I feel like grief introduced me to like getting an MBA in myself and
It's,
really understanding that, like you said, if you would have had that knowledge of you and like how things impacted you and the things that, hadn't been processed and why they're showing up this way, like you said, that would have given you the ability to say, okay, this is just part of the normal processing. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm not doing it wrong. I'm not this type of person or that type of person. I'm just going through one of the most challenging experiences that we're ever going to be faced with.
and that's the whole part of why doing coaching as opposed to I could have at one point when I left high school, I wanted to be a social worker. I could have gotten a degree or certification and diplomas for anything. But why the coaching industry was so appealing to me was because it was so results orientated and it's about reducing the learning curve for the client. And anybody who's challenged with grief to work alongside of somebody such as yourself, Karen, to aid them through that process. Not that they're not going to have to feel it, not that they're going to have to not process it themselves, but you facilitate that journey for them, that journey of unknowns. We started the conversation off with how our brain needs to know,
Hmm.
wants to know. And that's why you work with the coach. That's why you work with the grief counselor, because they're going to facilitate you through this process and give you the steps.
It, and that's absolutely the perfect way to say it. Coaches, we can't take away the pain. We can't fix the things, right?
No, and we're not your
That's
fairy
all the,
godmother, and we're not going to
yeah,
be able to wave
there's,
a magic wand
yeah, there's no magic wand,
and you're going to go to
unfortunately.
Cinderella's ball. No, it's not happening.
Yeah. But what you can do, right, it's you have that guide, and I think that's the perfect word, and it's almost like the most challenging things that we go through in life can become the survival guide for somebody else, and that's what I think we all think of is when I was going through it, what would have been really beneficial for me, and I think
Yeah.
that's what leads us to do this work because we wanna make it again, I can't take away the I can't take away the pains, the love that remains, but I can help reduce the suffering. And if I can help reduce the suffering just a little bit for somebody, that's why I do what I do.
Amen to that.
Yeah. And I know you get that. So this is a beautiful conversation.
Thank you, Karen.
So
I truly
grateful for
appreciate
you
this.
and for what you're doing in the world and how you're turning those scars into wisdom and sharing it. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, honey. Thank you.
All right. We'll talk to y'all later.